things we've been talking about on the show here for several days, and particularly tonight, is all the different things that are coming together to block what Trump is trying to do. Through the courts, through direct action, people protesting, through exposés in the press. But even as, for example, Elon Musk's teenage demolition crew has been blocked tonight from the Treasury Department by one set of tactics, and been blocked from the Labor Department by another set of tactics, they have been able to get through other places. They have, for example, gotten into the Department of Education, where they have reportedly obtained access to personal and, we believe, financial information on every person who's got a freaking federal student loan in this country, which is millions of people. They've also gotten into the Office of Personnel Management. Here's the Washington Post on the seriousness of that today. Quote, agents of billionaire Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, have gained access to highly restricted government records on millions of federal employees, including Treasury and State Department officials in sensitive security positions. The records maintained by the Office of Personnel Management amount to a repository of sensitive information about employees of most federal agencies, including addresses, demographic profiles, salary details, disciplinary histories. Two OPM officials said the level of access granted to DOGE agents means they could copy the social security numbers, phone numbers, and whole personnel files for millions of federal employees. Quote, they could put a new file in someone's record. They could modify an existing record. They could delete that record out of the database. They could export all that data about people who are currently or formerly employed by the government. They could export it to some non-government server or to their own PC or to a Google Drive. Or they could send it to a foreign country. One cybersecurity expert tells the Post, quote, it's highly likely they are improperly accessing, transferring, and storing highly sensitive data outside the environments in which it was intended to be contained. Quote, if I were a nation like China, Russia, or Iran, I'd be having a field day with a bunch of college kids running around with sensitive federal government data on unencrypted hard drives. So the president's top campaign donor and his little gang of interns have been blocked from some places, but they are still getting into lots of others. I should also point out, even where court orders have been issued stopping some of the things that the Trump administration is trying to do, we're not totally clear those orders are being followed. Quote, two federal judges have now issued several orders, for example, directing the White House to rescind the spending freeze that Trump implemented as soon as he took office. Even though that spending freeze legally is off, they can't do it. Nevertheless, there are multiple reports around the country of federally funded preschools and federally funded medical centers and federally funded infrastructure projects that still aren't being funded and that are starting to shut down, even though they have been ordered by a court to restart those funds. Big picture here, the thing I'm worried about is that it is starting to feel like an afterthought or like a footnote, that all this stuff appears not to just be bad and dangerous and damaging and unpopular, but patently illegal. If it is illegal, isn't it supposed to be stoppable? David Super is an administrative law professor at Georgetown Law School. He told the Washington Post this week, quote, so many of these things are so wildly illegal that I think they're playing a quantity game, and assuming the system cannot react to all this illegality all at once. If that is what's happening here, what do we do about it? Joining us now is David Super, administrative law professor at Georgetown. Professor Super, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Your diagnosis of the problem is unsettling. Does it come with a prescription?
That people need to keep bringing these things to the courts, that the agencies that are being defunded need to pass that along, that federal employees that are aware of data breaches need to pass that along, and that this does need to be raised with the courts.
Do you think the courts are capable of handling these things at speed to stop damage as it's being done? For example, the Office of Personnel Management personnel files for the federal government, that's a very, very, very damaging data breach. When you think about potential foreign adversaries, you think about the potential for all sorts of criminal or otherwise improper use of that material. obviously the courts have not been able to get in there quickly enough to stop that from happening. They may have acted quickly enough to, for example, save files at the Department of Labor. What should we understand about the court system and its ability to move with alacrity when necessary for the safety of the country?
Courts generally assume that the other branches of government are acting responsibly and show them deference. In this case, Mr. Musk has shown that he doesn't deserve any deference, and I hope the courts will start acting much more quickly and be more willing to presume that where there is smoke, there's fire. Data breaches are a problem because once they happen quickly, they can't be undone. Funding freezes and getting rid of valuable federal employees is a little bit easier to correct, but they're certainly hoping that the courts will get fatigued. I hope that's not true.
Let me ask you about one particular example. President Trump today says he is going to fire, he's going to lay off basically all of the 10,000 workers at USAID. There's also reporting today that tomorrow he may announce that he's laying off thousands of people at the Department of Health and Human Services. We have tonight just filed a new lawsuit by federal workers and foreign service unions asking the judge to halt the dismantling of USAID, let alone all of those firings. What do you make of the prospects for these things in terms of stopping the short-term actions of the president, but also in the long term, whether or not he'll be enjoined from doing these things that we all thought would be illegal?
Oh, they're openly illegal. The very first Congress of the United States decided what departments we would have. They debated that. George Washington didn't set up the State Department. Congress did. There's statutes creating all of these agencies that Mr. Trump says he's going to get rid of. He simply doesn't have the power to repeal those statutes. And I think the courts will recognize that. Most of these things they're doing aren't even plausibly legal. The question's going to ultimately come down to the Supreme Court and whether they're willing to give up their legacy and buy these completely preposterous legal theories. I don't think they are.
Given that, Professor Super, is there anything legally, just as a matter of tactics, that should be done right now that hasn't yet been done?
No, I think people are doing a very good job. I've been impressed with it. The AID lawsuit says exactly the right things, that President Trump is trying to repeal a law which he has no power to repeal. These are decisions made by Congress, and that he is being utterly arbitrary in taking these actions and has no grounds to do that. I think this litigation is going well, but a lot of damage is going to get done until ultimately the Supreme Court sends a signal that the rule of law still works around here.
Georgetown Law Professor David Super, thank you for your clarity on this. I appreciate you speaking in non-lawyerly terms so that all the rest of us can really understand some of the process here. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us.